Mm. Yeah, and one of my favorite songs. So, good morning. I'm happy to be back. I've been traveling with Charlie, my husband. We were at the Parliament of World Religions in Toronto for 10 days, listening, being fed from around the world. And the whole time, the invitation was for us to bring back to you the messages of their hearts. So I'll be speaking to that throughout the next few weeks as I have the opportunity to share some of the wisdom, some of the heart, some of the stories. But before I launch into our topic today, I wanted to reflect a little bit about what's going on in Paradise. And I don't know if anybody is here from Paradise or is aware of any loss. You are?
My boss at my work is
They lost their house. So,
I mean, the whole thing's burned down.
yeah. So we went through that and found our way, held each other through that. So we hold the people that don't know yet, that are waiting to find out. And Reverend Andy, as the Center for Spiritual Living there in Paradise, he's waiting to find out how we can help. So I'll keep you posted and let you know what's going on in their world. And our hearts are just stretched wide to send them peace and understanding and to hold them in that. And it triggers us when we smell our air, doesn't it? It's like the fires. And we're right back into some of our pain again. So we breathe and we hold each other as our planet tries to find its balance and its way with all of this. So, there's so much, and as we prepare for a talk, and then there's all the other things that are happening in the world, our elections and then shootings, and then the World Parliament was right after the horrible shootings at the synagogue, and so many of the Jewish tradition were speaking to their pain and to their healing in that, and then to come back home and have it happen so close to our in our state, and then at the same time it's happening across the world. So it's that poem that Mark Napo shares with us, Being Adrift, it's sort of the way we float. And Damien, again, I thank you. You read with such heart, and it helps to take us into the sadness, but also there is such beauty. And there's our heart, holding all that there is and finding our way as we walk that razor's edge to live a truth, to live a principle, and to feel inspired as we go on. So as I move into the idea of fear and punishment, such an odd title that Ernest Holmes wrote in this chapter of Living the Science of Mind. So I'll be touching mostly on the idea of fear, because punishment, there's not a God, we don't believe in a God up there that is punishing us, that these fires are a punishment. It is part of nature, and it is part of finding balance again, as horrific as it is, but not a punishment. We recognize our actions have consequences. That's what it is done unto us as we believe, and things happen. But fear is something that we're all very familiar with, and I wanted to launch into a story from Desmond Tutu. He describes the story of Nelson Mandela, and they were flying in a small propeller plane, and Nelson was with his bodyguard, big tough guy named Mike. And so there's Nelson Mandela quietly in the back of this plane reading the newspaper, and he looked out the window and he noticed that one of the propellers was not working. So he says, "Hey Mike, can you report that to the pilots?" Mike's like, "What, say what? Say what?" And the propeller's not working. So he goes, which he did, and they responded that yes, they were well aware, and that the emergency landing gear was in place. So Mike explained the situation to Nelson Mandela, and he nodded and went back to reading the paper. Well, Big Mike sat there trembling with fear, but also at the same time was so impressed by the calm nature and the response of Nelson, who looked so totally unbothered by the fact that they could fall from the sky at any moment. It wasn't until they were on the ground again that Nelson shared, when asked how the flight was when they're on the ground, he leaned out with big wide eyes saying, "Man, I was terrified up there." So, and then Mike's just going, "What?" So it's that idea of being in our fear, walking with it, but knowing that we can also walk in the presence of a deep calm, act as if it's so. I think that's such an incredible story, because there's so many times, isn't there, for each and every one of you, that you're in the walk of life and you're feeling a little off, but you have to move forward anyway. You have to allow a higher order of action to take over what you're going to accomplish. So we look at fear, and I like to reference it back to something that was in the World Parliament throughout almost every message, and that is the Golden Rule. And the Golden Rule is the one common ground of all of the faith paths that were there, over 200 faith paths walked together. It was wonderful to see the different sharing of the spiritual attire, the beautiful ways that everyone dressed and honored their tradition, but at the same time, all spoke and all applauded that there is only one. So the Golden Rule is something that perhaps many of you are familiar with, but let me remind you from the Native American, from Black Elk. He says, all things are our relatives, what we do to everything we do to ourselves. All is really one. From Helen Keller, she says, the welfare of each is bound up in the welfare of all. From Jainism, we should regard all creatures as we regard our own self. From the Judeo-Christian, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. From the Buddhist, one should seek for others the happiness one desires for oneself. Martin Luther King Jr., life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Eleanor Roosevelt, for our own success to be real, it must contribute to the success of others. From Islam, no one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. From Jane Addams, the good we secure for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for us all and incorporated into our common life. From the African proverb, one going to take a pointed stick to pinch a baby bird should first try it on himself to feel how it hurts. I'm not fond of that one. And then finally, from the Hopi tradition, don't go around hurting people and try to understand things. Golden Rule. They found the tradition throughout, the list goes on. There's many traditions that speak to this profound truth. And I think in Confucianism, it starts very, very boldly. When asked by a disciple whether here was one guiding principle that could lead him through life, the answer from Confucius, he said, mutual respect. I never impose on others what I would not choose for myself. Can we live that? Can we live that in our action? As we sometimes just go, oh, wow, that's a good poem. Oh, that's a good passage. And we feel a sense of our heart swelling in this knowing, in this love. But then we go out and do something snotty out in the world, just like that. And it's like, can we allow ourselves to really walk our talk? And Mary and I, for 2019 are looking at many ways that we can really bring this message forth and feel that there is love and there is action. There is love and there is action, that what we say, we do. And in that honoring of the deep self, our heart swells to live in the ideas that are set before us, and we're allowing this teaching to come alive and to be life-changing. And way back 500 year BC, this other gentleman, Thales of Miletus, says, avoid doing what you would blame others for doing. Can you sit with that one? Avoid doing what you would blame others for doing. So, mutual respect from Confucianism to the biblical scriptures to your own way with that statement, do unto others. And knowing that there is consequences for what we have done as a people at large, as a people to our planet. And so in the World Parliament, a global ethic that they encourage us all to be very aware of and to be very loyal to is this idea of taking care of our land, to take care of our water and our air in a way that doesn't allow our planet to heat up over 1.5 centigrade. And that's not very much. And there's so much we can do. And there's so many ways that we can not allow our water to run while we brush our teeth. Well, all these small ways that become large ways when you begin to see around the world the shrinking of the wells and the starving and the thirsty animals and the thirsty children. And you realize, I can help this. I can help this. I can help this now. I can do this today. I can allow my actions to be filled with love and reverence for our land. And the people, the indigenous people all around the world have been tapping us on the shoulder and quietly saying, we know the way. When I sound like a world traveler, but I went to Europe once in my life, and that was this year as well. But the idea when I was there that this world, I realized how young America was, and how much history there is out in the world. And I thought, oh my, I've been living very small. And their understanding of our history, of American history, is so different. It's like, oh well, that's not the way I read it in the history book for England. And then yet their story is quite different. The same with our Native American people. They have been quietly saying, listen to our way. And we heard this almost with every speaker throughout those 10 days. Listen to your own heart. Where have you been bound and confined in your own hearts by a story that we took from our elders, our teachers taught us that way? But is it true? Is it absolutely true? Is it serve us anymore? Is there a greater wisdom tapping on our shoulders saying, look for a deeper way, look for a more meaningful way? In Canada, one of the people was sharing that their people have been there for 15,000 years. And I'm going, is that real? You know, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. I felt innocent and naive. I kept thinking, is that a caveman? You know, just trying to look back on what I had constructed, not realizing I had done that. And I'm thinking, of course they're going to know the way. Of course they're going to know the land. Of course their language and their songs and their chants. And I felt the same way when I visited other cultures. And I recognized when I was in Peru how the people prayed for their ancestors. Oh, we're not doing that in America. We're not thinking that much. We're thinking about the here and now, which is good. But we're not thinking of generations past, generations forward. We're all one. What we do today affects the past, affects the future. Our blessed little children, what are we leaving for them? And so now we turn off our water as we brush our teeth. We find ways to start to not be such users of the abundance that we feel is a gift of nature, and it truly is, but we must also recognize that we have done some harm to it and it's out of balance. So we're working in ways to find how can we make a difference now? And so this brings up, in me, it brought up some fear in my lack of knowing. And fear, and you can feel it in yourself if you thought of your own story of fear. There was a Muslim doctor that shared in Palestine that he watched his 3 daughters die in a bomb bus. And he wrote a book, I Choose Not to Hate. Powerful stories of testimony of people facing great fear on a daily basis and yet choosing the divine way, the one way, the loving way to start to make a difference. So they all felt fear. They're no different. Every time you want to recognize in another, they too feel as I do. So this felt sense of fear, what is it? What is your story? And then what are the consequences of following those threads of fear? And sometimes when you look at punishment, as a child, you were punished for not doing right or wrong. Remember those days? And so punishment, we almost expected punishment, didn't we? In school, not getting the right grade. You know, you'd get in trouble if you were tardy or if you were late coming home. And there's all these punishments that we endured. And yet, that's not from God. Those are man-made. Those are things that we've laid upon one another. And there's a more skillful way to do a lot of these things that we've just become used to. So punishment, we want to recognize right now, is not from the divine. It is not from the divine. And there's ways that we can now co-create new ways of being in our world. So there's no need to fear God or a consequence thrust upon us as a punishment. We are whole, and we sometimes make mistakes, and we have done things unskillfully. And in that unskillfulness, we divide our consciousness against itself. Just like the poem said. And we watch ourselves kind of go adrift into that splitting of our consciousness. And the idea then follows that sometimes we allow doubt and worry to cloud our pure direction of where we want to go in the situation. So we want to start to recognize that mistakes will have consequences in their own nature. And when we go against a truth that we know is not right to do, when we know we want to engage in a little bit of gossip, just say it really fast, nobody will know I said it. Nobody knows I was kind of stirring the pot here. No. You know. And it's so interesting to watch yourselves try to play the game and think, oh, I can tell a little white lie here. No, you can't. Truth must prevail. And so we continue to honor the highway, to honor the divine way. And then to find ways where we have locked in an understanding that we didn't realize was so much in error. There was another example, and this was profound for me, because a native from Canada spoke for her people, and she was speaking to Michael Beckwith, who is Reverend Michael Beckwith from the Agape movement, and to Ken Gordon, to our panel of New Thought, which our philosophy is based on. And she was upset with the term New Thought when she said, why, when our people have been telling you this for years, you're calling it yours and you're calling it New Thought? And I thought, well, I feel that one, Michael. And he honored her word. He respected her with such grace. And then he taught her what New Thought means. He said, I can understand the misunderstanding. He said, new thought is divine thought. It's not man's thought. It's not the thought that you were used to. It's not the thought that was a doctrine before. It is, I can't paraphrase his way any better than this, but he said, it's that moment you open to the new thought intuitively of the divine and allow it to be. She goes, oh, I will take that back and explain it. That, just like that. The message from the New Thought panel to the people that were listening was to kind of close into each other, press into each other, lean into one another, and find where our common truths really do support one another and allow us to grow and emerge and to come out of fear into the glory, into that sense of deep knowing and confidence. So this idea leads us to the times whether we're going to have a consequence or we're really going to allow ourselves to learn from some of the challenges that are before us. What is ours to do right here and now? Are we going to repeat our patterns and continue to repent and be sorry? Or are we going to allow that regret to enforce us to use and choose another way? So it's very exciting to look at your life and to sit with the troubled heart and to say, this fear has allowed my actions to be less than I would like them to be. What must I learn from here? In The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes says, there is no sin but a mistake, and there's no punishment but an inevitable consequence. There is an immutable law of cause and effect running through everything. We are not punished by our sins, but by them. Sin is its own punishment, and righteousness is its own reward. I found that a bit confusing when he says there is no sin, and then he tells us what it is. But in the wordiness of what he's trying to say is it's just a mistake. And in that mistake, we find our own way. It's our guilt, right? Sometimes our guilt allows us to be punished enough just by our own thinking. So he goes on to say, let us approach the Science of Mind teachings with awe, not with fear, with a truly humble spirit, not with any sense that we're unworthy, and certainly with no superstition. Let us approach it normally, happily, willing to accept it, glad to experiment with it, believing that it's a result of our efforts, we shall derive a great good into our world and into this global universe which we find ourselves a part of. We'll have a better understanding of the natural laws of life as they apply to the individual, to us, and to our relationship with the universal scheme of all things. So think in your own heart the examples where you have felt separated from another by moments of fear, where fear caught your throat, when you wanted to speak love, when you wanted to speak truth, and yet you were bound by a precedent of something that happened before that allowed you to just close down, quiet down. We recognize that as we become more realistic with our expectations of ourselves when confronted with fear, when we realize this self-inflicted doubt and punishment in the form of stress and guilt that happens, that we've compromised our truth. We're expecting so much of ourselves. We really are. But the tenderness of the divine love anoints us with a knowing, almost a rocking of our innocence and our opportunity to try again, to remind ourselves that we are responsible for our actions and that we want to allow a sense of forgiveness upon ourselves, forgiveness of others for the unskillful ways. We are taught time and again to work with the element of forgiveness. And it's the most challenging with our own self. I found that at many retreats when we do the Ho'oponopono technique of of really blessing ourselves for the wrong thinking, the times where we were less skillful. It's the most tender time to really absorb that. So going back to the idea of looking at fear, it's inviting you to look deep, deep into your present moment. Look for your compassionate heart. Look for your deeper truth, longing to be revealed. A God of love cannot hate. A God of life cannot destroy. A God of good cannot desire evil. God is love, God is life, God is peace, God is joy, God is the givingness, God is the forgiveness. So we look at the law of life. We look at our knowing that it responds to each and every one of us the same. If you refuse to look deeply into the divine image, deep in certain circumstances, deep into the eyes of what you feel is the enemy of your heart, look deeper, look beyond their actions, go deep to the divine seed, and just bless and know. You have to not even say any words. May they be peaceful, may they be well. Find a balance between your thoughts and your actions, and recognize what happens to you is going to happen to them. What happens to them is going to happen to you, as we do unto others as we would like it to happen to us. Love others as you would like others to love you. Base your faith on this idea of our faith. What is your faith? What are you anchoring yourself in? This divine law, this divine peace, this divine presence. Take a breath. Come out of your head, hearing words coming towards you, images of stories from around the world, letting go of all of that and just dropping into the heart. Dropping into the heart, into the spiritual heart, into our natural beingness. Take a breath there and feel the heart expand. You see, there's no contraction when your heart is open. When you're willing to listen a little longer without the interruption of your own belief system, trying to penetrate and be right. We soften. We yield our way. And our faith blossoms because we're allowing our foundation to be laid in a foundation of absolute love. We will never, ever know the entire story of someone. And so often we've formed opinions about others when in truth we know very little. We cause ourselves and others so much grief. When people don't look, think, speak, or act as we do, we want them to. And then we become fearful because they're not. We lock our doors and close our minds and chase them from our neighborhood and attack for reasons we rationalize are so just. But we ultimately walk away feeling deep sorrow, deep loss at an opportunity to love. I can feel that. I can feel the potentiality of this moment, this pregnant moment of opportunity for each and every one of us to love so big, to hold all of this world in such a way that right action becomes a given, and we are allowing ourselves to truly experience this grace. So I invite you now, as Judy can come forward, as we play a song of a tune. We were at the symphony last night watching the musicians play with such attunement, becoming one in their notes. So allow the notes as Judy plays to touch the note of your own heart. And know there is no punishment. No punishment. You don't have to wait around for the punishment. Not anymore. We put that idea behind us. And we rise into the truth of our being. Can you feel it? As you soften your way, soften your heart to what is. I'm not asking for you to agree. The invitation is just to look, be present, to feel, to open, and allow love to light your way. Love lights the way, and the darkness dissipates. Can you see that as you soften your heart to see another way, to go back, back, back into your initial understanding that was put upon you? Is it true now? Does it serve me? Does it serve the other? Are we one? Let love, let the divine lead the way. Hand in hand we join, heart to heart we merge. We unify ourselves in this field of grace, in this field of love, in this field of opportunity. We are one. The world is calling for us to pay attention and to care and to act on that which we intuitively receive. So I give thanks right now for the opportunity to travel and to hear great, profound wisdom and to try to articulate that and share it with you, and for me to be able to hear back from you your wisdom, your way, your truth. We are one. Thank you, God, for a community that is growing, that is blossoming into a new thought. We lean on one another now and know that this is so. And together we say, so it is. Thank you.